You're staring at a hole in your cell wall that you carved with a bloody spoon over 3 years, wondering if tonight's the night you either taste freedom or get shot in the back. Prison walls weren't built to keep dreams in. They were built to keep bodies in, but some people never got that memo. Before we go in, drop a comment with what time you're watching this, because honestly, we're all trapped somewhere, and misery loves company. Subscribe for more stories about people who actually had the stones to do something about their situation. Tonight we're diving into the most audacious, brilliant, and completely mental prison escapes that made wardens question their career choices and governments rewrite their security manuals. These aren't your average, oops, left the door unlocked situations. These are masterpieces of human ingenuity wrapped in pure desperation. From carving wooden guns that fooled armed guards to disappearing through mile-long tunnels equipped like underground railways, these stories prove that when humans get desperate enough, we become absolutely terrifying in our creativity. Part 1. The wooden gun that started a legend. You're John Dillinger, public enemy number 1, the man who made bank robbery an art form and the FBI a laughingstock. Right now, though, you're just another number in the escape-proof Lake County Jail in Crown Point, Indiana, and it's 1934. You think about your reputation as you stare at these thick walls. Every newspaper in America has your face plastered across the front page. Every cop in the country wants to be the one who brings you down. Every warden thinks their prison is the one that'll finally hold John Dillinger. They're all wrong. Your cell is barely large enough for a grown man to lie down. The smell hits you every morning. Unwashed bodies, despair, and that particular stench of dreams rotting in concrete boxes. Your cellmates whisper stories that make your skin crawl. Escape attempts that ended with bullets in backs. Families getting visits from men in dark suits who ask too many questions. You've been handed what might be the longest prison sentence in American history. Life plus change, they're saying. Enough time to watch your hair go grey and your dreams turn to dust. But you're not planning on staying that long. You stare at the piece of wood from a broken washboard that someone left behind. Most people would see garbage. You see salvation. You spend weeks carving. Your fingers bleed, but you don't care. Your back screams from hunching over this ridiculous project, but you ignore it. You think about every bank you've robbed, every narrow escape, every time someone said John Dillinger couldn't be caught. They caught you once. It won't happen again. The other inmates watch you whittling away like some demented Boy Scout working on merit badges. They think you've lost your mind. Good. Let them think that. Let everyone think that. You're not carving wood. You're carving your ticket out of this concrete hell. The guards walk past dozens of times a day. They see you with your little project, and they smirk. Dillinger's lost it, they whisper to each other. The great bank robber's been reduced to playing with toys. Perfect. You love it when people underestimate John Dillinger. You blacken the wooden gun with shoe polish until it gleams like real steel. You practice the weight of it in your hand. You wrap it in cloth to hide the wood grain. In your cell, alone with your thoughts and your bleeding fingers, you practice drawing it until the motion becomes as natural as breathing. You know this gun will either make you free or get you killed. There's no middle ground when you're John Dillinger. The morning of March 3rd arrives grey and bitter. You wake up knowing something fundamental by nightfall. You'll either be breathing free air or bleeding out on cold concrete. You're fine with those odds. The breakfast comes through the slot. Watery oatmeal and coffee that tastes like someone strained it through dirty socks. You eat mechanically, but your mind is already 3 moves ahead. You think about the timing, the angles, the exact words you'll use. At 10 in the morning, you decide it's time to remind everyone why they call you public enemy number 1. At 10 in the morning, you make your move. Guard, you shout, pressing your face against the bars. I need to see the warden. It's about the Youngstown job. You're lying, obviously. But you're John Dillinger. When you talk, people listen. Deputy Ernest Blunk approaches your cell, keys jangling. He's young, maybe 25. with a kind of face that still believes people can be reformed. You almost feel sorry for him. Almost. What kind of information? Blunk asks, staying just out of reach. Smart kid. Not smart enough, though. The kind that gets me a deal, you say, pulling out your masterpiece. Your wooden gun looks real enough to fool the president himself. And why wouldn't it? Who in their right mind carves a fake gun in prison? Only someone insane enough to think it might actually work. Someone like you. Blunk's face goes white. You watch his hand move toward his real gun, but you're already talking, using that voice that's gotten you out of more tight spots than you can count. Easy there, deputy. No need for anyone to get hurt. Just open the cell nice and slow. You're thinking about everything at once. The angle of the gun, the distance to the door, the other guards who might hear. But mostly you're thinking about how sweet that first breath of free air is going to taste. The key turns. The door swings open. You're out. What happens next feels like a fever dream, but you're wide awake and thinking clearer than you have in months. You force Blunk to help you free other inmates. You're not just John Dillinger anymore. You're leading a small army of desperate men who've been waiting years for someone with the stones to make a move. You march the guards to the jail's garage, your heart pounding so hard you're sure everyone can hear it, but your voice stays steady because that's what John Dillinger does. He stays calm when everything's falling apart. The sheriff's car sits there like a gift from whatever gods look after bank robbers and madmen. A beautiful black sedan with a full tank of gas and keys in the ignition. You slide behind the wheel thinking about all the cars you've stolen, all the getaways you've made, all the times you've turned the corner just ahead of the bullets. This feels different though. This feels like destiny. The engine purrs to life. Through the windshield you can see guards scrambling, shouting orders, reaching for weapons, but they're too late, and you know it. You're already thinking about Chicago, about the Allies waiting there, about the banks that haven't met John Dillinger yet. You drive straight through downtown Crown Point, past the courthouse where they'd planned to sentence you to life. You think about the judge who was so sure his courtroom would be the last free place you'd ever see. Wrong again. Past the bank you robbed that got you caught in the first place. You tip an imaginary hat to it. Thanks for the learning experience. Past the movie theaters advertising gangster films that made you famous. You wonder if they'll make a movie about this someday. They probably will. Hollywood loves a good escape story. Your wooden gun sits on the passenger seat next to you. A piece of carved wood and shoe polish that just bought your freedom from the most secure jail in Indiana. You think about all the real guns you've owned, all the steel and lead that made you famous. None of them ever worked better than this ridiculous fake. You know this isn't the end of your story. It's barely the beginning. The FBI is about to declare personal war on you. J. Edgar Hoover will make hunting John Dillinger his agency's #1 priority. Your face will be on wanted posters in every post office in America. All because you had the audacity to believe a wooden gun could work. You drive south toward Chicago, where fresh crimes wait and old friends are ready to celebrate. In the rearview mirror, Crown Point disappears like a bad dream you're finally waking up from. You think about the warden, probably staring at your wooden gun right now, wondering how something so simple could make him look so foolish. He'll keep that gun for the rest of his life. You bet. A reminder that sometimes the most obvious plans are the ones nobody sees coming. You've got 4 months of freedom ahead of you. 4 months to rob more banks, embarrass more lawmen, and write your name into American legend with bullets and brass and the kind of nerve that turns ordinary men into myths. But right now, driving through Indiana countryside with the windows down and the wind in your hair, you're just a man who carved his way out of an impossible situation with nothing but wood, polish, and the absolute certainty that John Dillinger doesn't stay locked up. You think about reputation as the miles roll by. Your wooden gun worked because everyone expected John Dillinger to have a real gun. When you're famous enough, people believe what they think they should see instead of what's actually there. And your reputation, you realize with a grin, is about to get a whole lot more interesting. Part 2, The Ghost of Alcatraz. You're Frank Morris, bank robber. escape artist. The man with an IQ of 133 who's been in and out of prisons since you were 13 years old. Right now, you're waking up on Alcatraz Island and you're planning the impossible. It's 1962 and you're surrounded by some of the most dangerous men in America on a rock in San Francisco Bay that the government swears is escape-proof. The water's freezing, the currents are deadly, the sharks are hungry. You think those are pretty good odds for a man with nothing left to lose. You've been studying this place like it's your doctoral thesis. Every guard rotation, every structural weakness, every tide chart you can get your hands on. You've turned prison time into graduate-level education in maritime escape planning. The first thing you did was recruit the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence, two bank robbers from Georgia who've been dreaming of home-cooked meals and women who aren't made of concrete. They're not as smart as you, but they're desperate enough to follow you into hell if it means getting off this rock. Every night after lights out, while guards patrol and waves crash below, you work on your masterpiece. You've turned your cell into a construction site, carving through concrete that's supposedly harder than granite. Your tools are pathetic. Spoons stolen from the cafeteria, nail clippers, a piece of saw blade that someone smuggled in during a visit, but you've got something more powerful than proper equipment. You've got absolutely nothing left to lose and a brain that sees solutions where other men see walls. You work in darkness, your fingers bleeding from scraping concrete, night after night. The hole behind your sink grows larger, inch by painful inch. 6 inches of concrete between you and freedom, and you're going through it with cutlery and pure stubbornness. You think about every failed escape attempt you've heard about, every man who tried and died, every brilliant plan that fell apart because someone missed one detail. You're not missing anything. The plan forming in your head is insane, but it's also brilliant. You're going to crawl through the holes you're carving, climb through the prison's ventilation system, and somehow get off an island surrounded by water that kills men in minutes. But you've thought of everything. You start collecting materials like you're preparing for the most important art project of your life. Raincoats from other inmates, promising cigarettes and favors. These coats will become your life raft, sealed together with contact cement you figured out how to steal from the prison workshop. The dummy heads you create are masterpieces. Real hair from the barber shop. Soap and toilet paper molded into faces, paint mixed from whatever you can steal or trade for. When you place them on your pillow in the dark, they look real enough to fool guards who aren't expecting them. You study the bay like a ship captain, every current, every tide, every wind pattern. You know when the water moves toward shore and when it pulls toward the open ocean. You've turned laundry duty into surveillance missions, watching the water from every window you can access. You think about timing constantly. The guards make their final count at 9:30. That gives you hours before anyone checks again. Hours to crawl through concrete, climb through ventilation shafts, and disappear into water that's killed stronger men than you. The night of June 11th arrives foggy and moonless, perfect weather for ghosts. You lie in your cell thinking about every decision that brought you here, every crime, every arrest, every time someone said Frank Morris would never amount to anything. Tonight, you're going to prove them all wrong. At 9:30, the guards make their count. 3 heads on 3 pillows, 3 men apparently sleeping peacefully. The guards mark their sheets and move on, never imagining they're looking at soap and toilet paper instead of flesh and bone. By 10 o'clock, you're crawling through a hole that barely fits your shoulders, squeezing through concrete passages that feel like being buried alive. But you're not claustrophobic, you're Frank Morris, and claustrophobic men don't escape from Alcatraz. You emerge on the prison roof feeling like a ghost materializing from solid rock. San Francisco twinkles across the water, so close you can see individual apartment windows where free people are watching television and living normal lives. You think about those people safe and warm and free as you inflate your raincoat raft and prepare to slide down the prison walls toward water that might kill you. This is the moment when most escape attempts die, when reality hits and brave men realize they'd rather live in a cell than die in the bay. You're not most men. You slide down toward the water, thinking about every prison you've escaped from. Every time someone said it couldn't be done, you've made a career out of proving people wrong. What happens next depends on who you believe. The FBI will spend 17 years looking for you. They'll follow leads from Florida to South America. They'll find your personal items washed up on Angel Island. They'll find pieces of your raft, deflated and torn. They'll never find your body. Your fellow inmates will whisper stories for decades. Christmas cards with coded messages. Phone calls where no one speaks but the breathing sounds familiar. Photographs that might show you years later, older and grayer but unmistakably alive. You disappear so completely that you become a ghost story, a legend, proof that no prison is truly escape-proof if you're smart enough and desperate enough to bet everything on a plan that's equal parts genius and madness. Alcatraz closes the following year. Officially, it's because of budget concerns. Everyone knows the real reason. If Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers could vanish with spoons and raincoats, then escape-proof is just marketing. You proved that the most secure prison in America was only as strong as its weakest guard, its most overlooked ventilation shaft, its most predictable routine. Somewhere in the world you might be sitting on a beach, drinking beer and laughing about the night you walked through walls and disappeared into legend. Or you might be bones on the bottom of San Francisco Bay, claimed by water colder and more merciless than any prison guard. Either way, Frank Morris, you're finally free. Part 3. The escape artist who made soup his weapon. You're Yoshi Shiratori, and you're staring at the wooden floorboards of your cell in Aomori Prison, thinking about how miso soup might be the most underrated demolition tool in human history. It's 1936, and you're sitting in what the Japanese prison system calls their most secure facility. They've labelled you incorrigible after your third escape from supposedly escape-proof institutions, which is their polite way of saying Yoshi Shiratori makes their security experts look like children playing with toy locks. You think about reputation as you examine the floorboards beneath your feet. Every prison guard in Japan whispers your name like it's a curse word. Every warden studies your previous escapes like they're reading instruction manuals for humiliation. Every government official knows that keeping Yoshi Shiratori locked up has become a matter of national pride. They're about to learn that national pride is a poor substitute for actual security. Your cell in Aomori is the result of careful study of your previous escape methods. No windows, reinforced walls, a door that's been upgraded with enough iron to build a small bridge. The guards check on you every 30 minutes, day and night, like you're a natural disaster that needs constant monitoring. But you've noticed something they haven't. The floorboards directly under your sleeping area are old, ancient. They've been soaking up moisture from the ground below for decades, slowly rotting from the inside while maintaining their surface appearance. You think about patience as you start working on them with your bare hands. Most prisoners want immediate results. They attack problems with violence and desperation, creating noise and evidence that leads to discovery and punishment. You're not most prisoners, you're Yoshi Shiratori, and you understand that the most powerful forces in nature work slowly and invisibly until the moment they become unstoppable. Your fingernails crack and bleed as you pick at the wood grain night after night, progress measured in splinters and slivers. Each session brings you closer to freedom by distances so small that guards walking overhead have no idea their most dangerous prisoner is literally undermining their authority, one fiber at a time. You think about chemistry as months pass without breakthrough. Wood rots through exposure to moisture and acid. The problem is getting enough moisture and acid to the right place without arousing suspicion from guards who watch your every movement. That's when you have your revelation about the miso soup. Every meal includes soup, salty, acidic, perfect for breaking down organic matter when applied consistently over time. While other prisoners consume their soup like normal human beings, you start saving yours. Drop by drop, you pour it into the cracks between floorboards. You think about irony as you work. The Japanese prison system is feeding you the exact tool you need to escape from their custody. Every spoonful of soup they provide becomes ammunition in your war against their floorboards. The guards think you're just a messy eater when they see soup stains on the floor around your sleeping area. They have no idea you're conducting a chemical experiment that's slowly dissolving the foundation of their security. You continue your routine for months. Pick up the wood grain during the night when sound is covered by sleeping prisoners. Pour soup into cracks during meals when guards expect you to be focused on eating. Wait for chemistry to do what brute force cannot accomplish. You think about persistence as the floorboards gradually weaken. Other inmates whisper that you've lost your mind, spending so much time staring at the floor like you're trying to memorize the wood grain. Perfect. Crazy prisoners don't escape. They just sit in cells and slowly lose their grip on reality. Let them think you're crazy. Yoshi Shiratori has built a career on being underestimated by people who confuse unconventional methods with mental illness. After 2 years of patient work, the floorboards finally surrender to your chemical assault. Not dramatically, but board by board, revealing a space just large enough for Japan's most determined escape artist to squeeze through. You think about timing as you widen the hole during the darkest hours of night. Every sound must be muffled. Every movement must be calculated. Discovery at this stage would mean transfer to an even more secure facility, and you're not sure there's enough soup in Japan to dissolve your way out of whatever they build next. The night you choose for escape is moonless and raining, perfect weather for ghosts to disappear into the Japanese countryside. You slip through your handmade portal, thinking about every assumption the guards made about wood, soup, and the lengths to which Yoshi Shiratori will go to prove that no prison can hold him permanently. Under the prison, you crawl through mud and darkness that feels like being buried alive, but you've been buried alive in a cell for years. This burial comes with the possibility of resurrection on the other side. You emerge outside the prison walls covered in filth, but breathing free air. Behind you, Amori Prison sits quiet and secure, its guards confident that their most dangerous prisoner is safely contained by floorboards that no longer exist. You think about education as you disappear into the night. This is just your escape from Amori. You'll be caught eventually and sent to even more secure facilities, but each escape teaches you new techniques that make the next one more sophisticated. By the time your criminal career ends, you'll have escaped from 4 different prisons using 4 completely different methods. You'll become the greatest escape artist in Japanese history, proving that human ingenuity can overcome any security system if applied with sufficient patience and creativity. You think about legacy as you put distance between yourself and the prison that thought it could hold you. Future escape artists will study your methods. Prison officials will implement new security measures designed specifically to prevent Yoshi Shiratori-style escapes. But they'll always be one step behind because they're trying to secure prisons against methods you've already abandoned in favor of techniques they haven't imagined yet. Yoshi Shiratori, you don't just escape from prisons, you evolve past them, demonstrating that human determination combined with unconventional thinking can overcome any obstacle that other humans design to contain it. Your miso soup technique becomes legendary proof that the most effective weapons are often the ones that nobody recognizes as weapons until they've already been used to devastating effect. You've turned prison meals into demolition tools, proving that escape artists don't need smuggled equipment when they understand that everything around them can become a tool if they think about it correctly. The floorboards you dissolved with soup become monuments to patience, creativity, and the fundamental truth that no security system is stronger than its designer's ability to imagine every possible method of attack. And Yoshi Shiratori's imagination, it turns out, is considerably more dangerous than anyone suspected. Part 4. The Great Escape. Your squadron leader Roger Bushell, and you're standing in the middle of Stalag Luft 3, staring at what the Germans call their most escape-proof prisoner of war camp. It's 1943, and you're surrounded by some of the best pilots the Royal Air Force has ever produced. You're also planning the most ambitious prison break in military history. The Germans think they've been clever, building this camp specifically for Allied airmen. No local contacts to help with escapes. No nearby cities to blend into. Just pine forest and sand for miles in every direction. You think they've made one crucial mistake. They've put all their most resourceful, intelligent, and absolutely determined prisoners in one place. You've been shot down over France, captured, and dragged across Europe to this camp in Poland. You speak perfect German, thanks to your law studies in Berlin before the war. The guards think this makes you dangerous. They have no idea how dangerous. You're planning to get 76 men out of this camp simultaneously. Not just a few prisoners sneaking away in the night. You're organizing a mass exodus that will force the Germans to divert thousands of troops from the war effort to hunt down escaped Allied airmen. You call it Operation Escape, but everyone else calls it the Great Escape. The plan forming in your mind is audacious beyond belief. 3 tunnels, each deeper and longer than anything attempted before, code names Tom, Dick, and Harry. One will be discovered, one will be abandoned, one will carry 76 men to freedom. You start recruiting specialists like you're building a corporation instead of planning a jailbreak. Engineers to design the tunnels, carpenters to build supports, tailors to create civilian clothes, forgers to manufacture identity papers, intelligence officers to gather information about guard routines and local geography. You think about every detail obsessively. The tunnels need to be 30 feet deep to avoid German sound detection equipment. They need to stretch over 300 feet to reach the forest beyond the camp perimeter. They need ventilation systems, electric lighting, and railway tracks to move dirt efficiently. You're not just escaping from prison. You're building an underground city. The work begins in your hut, where you've convinced the Germans to let prisoners build a library. While they watch you organize books, you're actually organizing the entrance to Tunnel Tom. Every day, men disappear beneath the floorboards to claw their way toward freedom, one handful of dirt at a time. You establish an elaborate security system. Lookouts posted throughout the camp, ready to signal if guards approach. Code words that mean hide everything and evacuate the tunnel. You've turned the entire camp into a military operation with you as commanding officer. The dirt disposal becomes an art form. Prisoners sew bags inside their trouser legs, filling them with tunnel dirt and releasing it gradually as they walk around the camp. You watch men casually strolling past German guards, leaving trails of incriminating soil that gets mixed into the camp's existing dirt and disappears forever. You think about the psychology of your captors constantly, German efficiency working against them. They're so confident in their security measures that they don't look for the impossible. A tunnel 30 feet deep. Ridiculous. Nobody could dig that far without proper equipment. Months pass. Tom gets discovered when a guard notices fresh dirt where there shouldn't be any. You abandon Dick when the tunnel fills with water. But Harry continues growing, foot by foot, toward the tree line that represents freedom. You recruit volunteers for the actual escape, knowing that most of them will be caught, knowing that some of them will be killed, but also knowing that every German soldier hunting escaped prisoners is a German soldier not fighting Allied troops. The night of March 24th arrives cold and moonless. Perfect weather for 76 ghosts to disappear into the Polish countryside. You go through Harry yourself, crawling through a tunnel that took almost a year to build. The wooden supports creak ominously. The air tastes of mud and desperation. Behind you, 75 other men follow, each one betting his life that your plan will work. You emerge from the ground expecting to be in the forest, but your measurements were slightly off. You're in an open field, clearly visible to the guard towers. The tunnel is too short by about 30 feet. This is the moment when most escape attempts collapse, when fear takes over and brave men decide that life in prison is better than death in a field. You're not most men. You signal for the escape to continue. One by one, 76 Allied airmen crawl out of the ground and disappear into the darkness. Some will make it to neutral countries. Most will be recaptured within days. 50 will be murdered by the Gestapo in violation of the Geneva Convention. You'll be one of the 50. But your great escape accomplishes exactly what you intended. Thousands of German troops are pulled from combat duties to hunt for escaped prisoners. The Nazi war machine loses precious resources chasing shadows through Polish forests. Your tunnel becomes the stuff of legend. Books will be written about it. Movies will be made. Future prisoners of war will study your methods and dream of following your example. You proved that even in the darkest circumstances, human beings can organize, plan, and execute operations that seem impossible. You turned a prisoner of war camp into a staging ground for one of the most audacious military operations of World War II. Squadron leader Roger Bushell, you didn't just escape from prison, you turned prison into a battlefield, and you fought until your last breath. Part 5. Wooden Keys to Freedom. You're Tim Jenkin, and you're staring at the lock on your cell door in Pretoria Central Prison. It's 1979, and you're here because the South African apartheid government considers you a terrorist for opposing their racial policies. You think they're about to learn what a real terrorist can do with a piece of wood and unlimited determination. You're sharing this nightmare with Stephen Lee, another white South African who made the mistake of believing that all human beings deserve equal rights. The guards treat you both like dangerous revolutionaries, which is ironic because you're about to become exactly that. Your cell is part of the maximum security section, supposedly designed to hold the most dangerous political prisoners in the country. Steel doors, electronic locks, guards who've been trained to watch for any sign of escape attempts. You think they've overlooked one crucial detail. They've given two intelligent, motivated, and absolutely furious political prisoners nothing but time to study their security systems. You start by observing everything: guard rotations, lock mechanisms, the sound different keys make when they turn. You memorize the daily routine until you can predict what will happen next better than the guards themselves. The breakthrough comes when you realize that the prison has been using the same key system for decades. Simple, reliable, and completely vulnerable to someone with enough patience to figure it out. You begin studying the locks like a master craftsman learning his trade. Every time a guard opens your cell, you watch the key, you memorize its shape, its dimensions, the way it fits into the mechanism. You're building a mental blueprint of freedom. The wood comes from your workshop assignment, while other prisoners make furniture for the guards' homes. You're secretly collecting pieces of the right size and density. You test different types of wood, learning which ones can be carved precisely enough to fool a lock mechanism. You think about tolerances constantly. A real key works because every dimension is exact. Too thick, and it won't fit. Too thin, and it won't turn the mechanism. You need to create wooden keys that are perfect replicas of their metal counterparts. The carving begins in your cell after lights out. Using improvised tools, pieces of metal from workshops, sharpened screws, anything that can cut wood with precision. You work by feel in the darkness. Your fingers become so sensitive that you can detect differences of millimeters. Stephen becomes your testing partner and lookout. While you carve, he watches for guards and helps you refine the key designs. You're not just two prisoners planning an escape, you're engineers solving an impossibly complex problem with primitive tools. Months pass. You create key after key, testing each one against the lock mechanism when guards aren't around. Most don't work. Some get close. A few work perfectly, turning the lock mechanism with the same smooth motion as the original metal keys. You think about security systems as you work. They're designed to stop people who try to break them with force. But what about someone who recreates them with precision, who turns the lock exactly the way it's supposed to turn, just with a different key? The night of December 11th arrives. You've been planning this escape for over a year, and you know that tonight is your only chance. Tomorrow, one of you is being transferred to a different prison. You wait until the guards make their final rounds, then produce your collection of wooden keys. Your hands shake slightly as you insert the first key into your cell lock. It turns perfectly. You're out of your cell, Standing in a corridor that you've only seen through bars for months, Stephen's lock takes longer. This key needs slight adjustments, but finally clicks open. Now comes the really difficult part, getting through the multiple security checkpoints between your cells and the prison's outer perimeter. You move through the prison like ghosts, using wooden keys to open door after door. Each lock mechanism yields to your hand-carved tools. Each barrier that was supposed to contain you becomes just another step toward freedom. You think about the irony as you work. The apartheid government imprisoned you for opposing their system of racial classification. Now you're escaping using skills that prove human intelligence, and determination can't be classified or contained. The final door opens onto the prison courtyard. Fresh air hits your faces for the first time in months. Beyond the walls, the lights of Pretoria twinkle like promises of freedom. You scale the outer wall using techniques you've been practicing mentally for months. Every movement calculated, every handhold planned. You drop into the street outside and begin walking toward lives that no longer belong to the South African government. Your wooden keys become symbols of resistance against apartheid. Word spreads through the underground movement that 2 white political prisoners outsmarted the maximum security system using nothing but carved wood and brilliant planning. Prison officials study your escape methods, trying to understand how wooden keys could possibly work well enough to fool their security systems. They upgrade their locks, change their protocols, and train their guards to watch for improvised tools. But you've already proven the fundamental truth that terrifies authoritarian governments everywhere. Human creativity and determination can overcome any system of oppression if given enough time and motivation. Tim Jenkin and Stephen Lee, you didn't just escape from Pretoria Central Prison, you carved your way out of apartheid itself, one wooden key at a time. The keys you left behind become evidence that even the most sophisticated systems of control are only as strong as their weakest assumptions about human nature. And their biggest assumption was that political prisoners would accept their fate quietly. They were wrong. Part 6. The Maze That Couldn't Hold Them. You're Bobby Story, and you're standing in H Block 7 of the Maze Prison in Northern Ireland. It's 1983, and you're surrounded by 37 other members of the Irish Republican Army who are about as fond of British rule as you'd expect. You're also planning to walk out of the most secure prison in the United Kingdom like you're leaving a hotel after checkout. The maze was built specifically to contain Irish Republicans who have an annoying habit of escaping from regular prisons. The British government designed it like a fortress, multiple security barriers, armed guards, electronic surveillance, and a reputation for being absolutely escape-proof. You think they've made one fatal mistake. They've concentrated the most resourceful, motivated, and tactically brilliant members of the IRA in one place. Your fellow prisoners aren't ordinary criminals. These are men who've been fighting a guerrilla war against the British Army for years. They know about surveillance, weapons, tactics, and the kind of planning that turns impossible situations into strategic victories. You've been studying this prison like it's enemy territory to be conquered. Every guard rotation, every weak point in their security, every moment when their attention might be elsewhere, you've turned imprisonment into military reconnaissance. The plan forming in your mind is audacious beyond a belief. You're going to take control of an entire prison block, overpower the guards, steal their weapons, and walk out through the front gate like you own the place. Because for a few hours you will own the place. You start recruiting carefully. Not everyone can handle what you're planning. This requires men who can stay calm under pressure, follow orders precisely, and fight like their lives depend on it, because they will. The weapons come from an outside contact who's managed to smuggle guns past the prison's security systems. Real firearms, hidden in locations throughout the prison where only you and your inner circle know to find them. You think about timing obsessively. Sunday afternoon is perfect. Fewer guards on duty. Relaxed atmosphere. The British assume that Irish prisoners spend Sundays praying and reflecting on their crimes. They're about to learn that some prayers get answered in unexpected ways. October 30th arrives grey and quiet. You're in the prison's study area with your team, pretending to read books and newspapers while actually conducting final preparations for the most ambitious prison break in British history. At 3:15, you make your move. The first guard to approach your group finds himself staring down the barrel of a smuggled pistol. His training tells him to resist. His survival instincts tell him to cooperate. Survival wins. What happens next moves like a military operation, because that's exactly what it is. Your team spreads through H Block 7, overpowering guards and taking control of strategic positions. Within minutes, you command an entire section of the prison. You think about the psychology of surprise as you work. The guards expected many things from Irish Republican prisoners. Armed revolt wasn't one of them. Their shock gives you precious minutes to consolidate control before they can organize a response. The guards you've captured become your ticket out. You force them to strip off their uniforms, which your men put on like they're costume pieces in a theatre production. Suddenly, Irish Republicans become British prison guards, at least to casual observation. You march your hostages toward the prison's main gate, your team dressed as guards escorting prisoners. To anyone watching from a distance, it looks like a routine prisoner transfer. The gate guard recognizes something wrong just a moment too late. By the time he realizes that the guards are actually prisoners and the prisoners are actually hostages, your men are already through the checkpoint. You're outside the Maze prison, breathing free air and thinking about how 38 Irish Republicans just walked out of Britain's most secure facility like they were employees leaving work. But this is just the beginning of your problems. Northern Ireland is a small place crawling with British soldiers who will soon be hunting for 38 armed and extremely dangerous escaped prisoners. Your group scatters according to predetermined plans. Some head for the border with the Republic of Ireland. Others disappear into safe houses throughout Ulster. A few make it to boats that will carry them to continental Europe. You know that most will be recaptured eventually. The British security forces are too thorough and too determined to let this embarrassment stand. But you also know that every day you remain free is a victory against British rule in Ireland. The escape becomes legendary throughout Ireland and beyond. 38 men walking out of the Maze prison proves that no British institution is truly secure when faced with Irish determination and military-grade planning. Prison officials spend months trying to understand how their security was so completely compromised. They find evidence of the smuggled weapons, the careful planning, the detailed intelligence gathering that made your escape possible. What they can't understand is how 38 men kept such an elaborate secret for so long without someone betraying the plan to authorities. The answer is simple. When you're fighting for something you believe in more than your own safety, loyalty becomes absolute. Your escape forces the British government to completely redesign their prison security protocols. New procedures, new technology, new levels of surveillance that turn prisons into something approaching military bases. But you've already proven that human determination and careful planning can overcome any security system if the motivation is strong enough. Bobby's story. You didn't just escape from the Maze prison, you proved that the British government's control over Northern Ireland was more fragile than they wanted to admit. And you did it by walking out the front door like you owned the place. Because for those few crucial hours you did. Part 7. The Butterfly and the Shark-Infested Escape. You're Henri Chalier, though everyone calls you Papillon because of the butterfly tattoo on your chest. Right now you're standing on the cliffs of Devil's Island, staring down at water that's supposed to be full of sharks. You're thinking about jumping. It's the 1940s, and you're trapped on France's most notorious penal colony off the coast of French Guiana. You've been sentenced to life imprisonment for a murder you swear you didn't commit, though at this point your innocence matters less than your freedom. You think about the irony as waves crash against the rocks below. They call this place Devil's Island. But you're starting to think the real devils are the ones who built it. This is your third escape attempt from the French penal system. The first two didn't work out so well. Solitary confinement on Devil's Island tends to be the punishment for men who refuse to accept their fate quietly. but you've never been good at accepting anything quietly. Your cell is a concrete box barely large enough for a man to lie down. The heat is unbearable. The food is designed to keep you alive, nothing more. The guards treat you like an animal that needs to be contained rather than a human being who deserves basic dignity. You think about your options constantly. The island is surrounded by water that's supposedly full of sharks. The currents are treacherous. The nearest mainland is miles away through jungle that's killed stronger men than you. Most prisoners look at these obstacles and see certain death. You look at them and see challenges to be overcome with proper planning and enough desperation. You've been studying the tides like a master navigator. Every day you watch the water from your cell window, learning when it moves toward shore and when it pulls toward the open ocean. You're turning solitary confinement into maritime education. The plan forming in your mind is either brilliant or completely insane. You're going to construct a raft from coconuts and driftwood, wait for the perfect tide and ride the current away from Devil's Island toward the mainland. The fact that this plan has never worked for anyone else doesn't discourage you. You're not anyone else. You're Papillon, and Papillon doesn't stay caged. You start collecting materials during your brief exercise periods. Coconuts that have washed up on the shore, pieces of wood that prisoners use for various purposes, rope that you weave from whatever fibers you can find, or steel. You think about buoyancy, weight distribution, and survival techniques as you work. This isn't just an escape attempt. It's a masterclass in maritime engineering using primitive materials and unlimited determination. The raft you construct looks like something a child might build in their backyard. Coconuts, lashed together with improvised rope, a small platform that might support one desperate man if he's lucky enough to avoid the sharks. You know the statistics. Most men who attempt to escape from Devil's Island end up as shark food or jungle bones. The French authorities are so confident in these natural barriers that they don't even bother with extensive patrols. They're about to learn that some men are willing to bet everything on impossibly long odds. You wait for the perfect night, low tide that will carry you away from the island, calm seas that won't immediately destroy your fragile raft, darkness that will hide your escape until you're too far away to catch. The night arrives cloudy and moonless, perfect weather for disappearing. You slip your raft into the water thinking about every decision that brought you to this moment, every crime you may or may not have committed, every door that closed behind you, every dream that died in a concrete cell. Tonight, you're betting everything that some dreams refuse to die. You push off from Devil's Island and immediately realize how small and fragile your raft really is. Waves that looked manageable from shore feel enormous when you're floating on coconuts and prayer. But you're committed now. Behind you, Devil's Island disappears into darkness. Ahead of you, the ocean stretches endlessly toward a mainland that might as well be on another planet. You think about sharks as you paddle. Every splash could be a fin breaking the surface. Every shadow could be death approaching from below. But fear is a luxury you can't afford when you're betting your life on coconuts and courage. Hours pass. Your raft holds together better than you expected. The current carries you steadily away from the prison island toward whatever fate awaits on the mainland. Dawn breaks to reveal that you've survived the night. No sharks, no capsizing. You're still alive, still free, still riding your impossible raft toward an uncertain future. The mainland appears as a green line on the horizon, jungle that's killed men before, but jungle that contains possibilities that don't exist in prison cells. You beach your raft on a deserted shore and step onto free soil for the first time in years. Behind you, Devil's Island is a distant speck that no longer has any claim on your life. Your escape becomes legendary throughout the French penal system and beyond. The man who jumped off Devil's Island and lived to tell about it. The prisoner who rode coconuts to freedom through shark-infested waters. Prison officials study your methods, trying to understand how a man with no resources except determination could overcome obstacles that had stopped every previous escape attempt. The answer is simpler than they want to admit. You succeeded because the alternative was spending the rest of your life in a concrete box on an island that epitomized human cruelty. Henri Charrière, you didn't just escape from Devil's Island. You proved that human beings can survive anything if they refuse to give up hope. Your butterfly tattoo becomes a symbol of metamorphosis, the transformation from prisoner to free man, accomplished through courage that most people can't even imagine. You'll write books about your experiences. Hollywood will make movies about your escapes, but none of that captures the simple truth of what you accomplished. You looked at impossible odds and decided they weren't impossible enough to stop Papillon from flying free. Part 8. The Helicopter Bandit. You're Pascal Payette, and you're staring up at the exercise yard of Lines Prison through the bars of your cell window. The sky above looks particularly blue today, which is important because you're expecting a visitor with rotor blades. It's 2001, and you're serving time for armed robbery in one of France's more secure facilities. The guards think they've got you contained with concrete walls, steel bars, and electronic surveillance. You think they've forgotten to secure the one direction that really matters. Straight up, you've been planning this escape for months, but not the way other prisoners plan. While they dig tunnels and carve keys, you've been studying helicopter flight patterns and recruiting pilots who understand that some jobs pay better than others. You think about the psychology of prison security as you watch guards patrol the yard. They're trained to watch for people going under walls, through walls, around walls. Nobody trains them to watch for people going over walls at 100 feet per second. The helicopter appears exactly on schedule, a white speck against the blue sky that grows larger with each passing second. The guards in the towers notice it first, probably wondering why a helicopter is flying so low over a maximum security prison. They're about to find out. You're already moving, sprinting across the exercise yard toward the spot where you know the helicopter will land. Around you, other prisoners scatter like startled birds, some running for cover, and others stopping to watch what might be the most audacious escape attempt they've ever witnessed. The helicopter touches down in the center of the yard, rotor blades whipping dust and debris into a sandstorm that provides perfect cover for what happens next. Guards shout orders and reach for weapons, but they're too far away and too shocked to react effectively. You're thinking about timing as you run. Every second counts. The longer the helicopter stays on the ground, the more chance someone gets organized enough to stop this madness. You leap into the helicopter like you're boarding a bus, and immediately you're airborne, rising above the prison walls while guards below point weapons they can't effectively use without risking civilian aircraft violations. You think about the view as the prison shrinks beneath you. All those walls and barriers and security measures reduced to a geometric pattern that gets smaller with each passing second. From up here, maximum security looks like a children's playground. But this is just your first helicopter escape. You're about to make this your signature move. You get recaptured eventually, because France is a relatively small country, and helicopter escapes tend to attract attention from law enforcement agencies with helicopters of their own. But you've proven a point that prison officials desperately wish you hadn't proven. If you think three-dimensionally about escape routes, most prison security becomes irrelevant. Your second helicopter escape comes in 2003, this time from Grasse Prison. Same method, different prison, equally shocked guards staring up at the sky, wondering how one man can make their security systems look so pathetic. You think about branding as you disappear into the French countryside. Pascal Payette isn't just an armed robber anymore. You're the helicopter escape artist, the man who turns maximum security prisons into landing pads. The third escape, in 2007, becomes your masterpiece. This time you hijack a helicopter instead of recruiting a pilot, because apparently finding reliable helicopter pilots for prison breaks is more difficult than you initially thought. You force the pilot to land at Grasse Prison, where 3 of your associates are waiting to be picked up. 4 men escaping simultaneously via helicopter, while prison officials watch helplessly from the ground. You think about the mathematics of the situation as you fly toward freedom. The French prison system has just been embarrassed by the same man 3 times using the same method. This isn't just escape artistry anymore. This is performance art. Prison authorities across France redesign their security protocols specifically: anti-aircraft measures, no-fly zones, nets stretched across exercise yards that look like giant spider webs, designed to catch airborne criminals. But you've already established your reputation. Pascal Payet, the man who proved that the third dimension exists in prison escape planning, the criminal who forced an entire nation to look up when they think about security. Your escapes become case studies in security academies. How does one man repeatedly embarrass professional security systems using the same method? How does he find pilots willing to risk their lives and careers for money? The answers reveal uncomfortable truths about security thinking. Most prison security is designed to contain people who think like prisoners, but you think like a pilot, like someone who sees walls as obstacles to fly over rather than barriers to go through. You also think like an entrepreneur. Each helicopter escape requires careful planning, financial investment, and risk assessment. You're not just a criminal, you're a criminal with a business plan. Law enforcement eventually catches up with you permanently, using the kind of resources typically reserved for international terrorists. Helicopters, surveillance networks, and coordination between agencies that had never needed to work together before Pascal Payet started flying out of prisons. But you've left a legacy that every prison designer now has to consider. When they build new facilities, they don't just think about walls and doors and electronic surveillance. They think about the sky, about what happens when someone approaches their security from an angle they never expected. Pascal Payet, you didn't just escape from prison 3 times. You forced an entire nation to redesign their understanding of what secure means. And you did it by remembering that human beings were born to fly, even if we need machines to help us remember how. Part 9. The Tunnel Beneath Hell. You're Colonel Thomas Rose, and you're staring at the dirt floor of Libby Prison in Richmond, Virginia. It's 1863, and you're surrounded by over 1,000 Union officers who've been captured by Confederate forces. You're also planning to dig your way out of the Civil War's most notorious prison. Libby Prison isn't just a place of confinement. It's a deliberate instrument of torture, designed to break the spirit of Union officers through starvation, overcrowding, and systematic humiliation. The Confederates want Northern prisoners to suffer in ways that will demoralize the entire Union Army. You think they've made one crucial mistake. They've put some of the most resourceful and determined military minds in America in one place with nothing to do but plan. Your fellow prisoners aren't ordinary soldiers. These are colonels, majors, captains, men trained in engineering, logistics, and the kind of strategic thinking that wins battles. The Confederates have created their own worst nightmare, a prison full of military experts with unlimited time to study their security weaknesses. You start organizing like you're planning a military campaign, because that's exactly what this is. A campaign to move 109 men from inside Libby Prison to Union lines without being detected, captured, or killed. The tunnel begins in the basement kitchen, where you've discovered that Confederate guards rarely venture. You and your team work in shifts, digging through Richmond soil that's hard as concrete during the day and turns to mud when it rains. You think about engineering problems constantly: ventilation for men working 30 feet underground, structural support to prevent cave-ins, dirt disposal that won't leave obvious evidence of excavation. You're building an underground railroad literally beneath the feet of Confederate guards. The tools are primitive: spoons stolen from the kitchen, pieces of broken crockery that can cut through packed earth, hands that bleed from clawing through soil that fights back against every inch of progress. But you have something more powerful than proper equipment. You have military discipline and the absolute certainty that failure means dying slowly in a Confederate hell, designed to break Union officers. Months pass, as your tunnel grows foot by foot toward the fence line beyond the prison walls. You establish elaborate security procedures, lookouts who watch for Confederate guards, signals that mean hide everything and evacuate immediately. You've turned the entire prison into a military intelligence operation. You think about Confederate psychology as you work. Southern guards assume that Union officers are demoralized and broken by their imprisonment. They expect resignation, not resistance. This assumption becomes your greatest advantage. The dirt disposal requires careful planning. Prisoners fill their pockets with tunnel soil and scatter it around the prison yard during exercise periods. What was once evidence of escape attempts becomes part of the landscape, invisible to guards who aren't looking for it. You study the ground above your tunnel, memorizing every building, every fence post, every guard position. When you emerge, you need to know exactly where you are and exactly how to reach Union lines without being detected. The night of February 9th arrives cold and moonless, perfect weather for 109 ghosts to disappear into the Virginia countryside. You go through the tunnel first, crawling through a passage that took months to excavate. Behind you, 108 other Union officers follow, each man betting his life that your engineering calculations were correct. You emerge in a vacant lot beyond the prison walls, breathing free air for the first time in months. Around you, Union officers materialize from the ground like soldiers rising from the dead. But this is just the beginning of your problems. You're in the heart of Confederate territory, surrounded by Southern soldiers who will shoot Union officers on sight. Richmond is crawling with Confederate patrols who will be hunting for escaped prisoners as soon as your absence is discovered. Your group scatters according to predetermined plans. Some head north toward Union lines, others go east toward the coast. A few try to blend into the local population and wait for opportunities to escape later. You know that many will be recaptured. The Confederacy can't allow Union officers to escape without consequences. But you also know that every man who reaches Union lines represents a victory against Confederate attempts to break Union morale through imprisonment. 59 men make it to safety. 59 Union officers who return to fight against the Confederacy, with stories about Confederate prison conditions that enrage the Northern public and strengthen resolve to win the war. Your tunnel becomes legendary throughout both the Union and Confederate armies, the greatest prison escape in Civil War history, planned and executed by Union officers who refused to accept defeat, even in Confederate captivity. Confederate authorities spend weeks trying to understand how 109 men could disappear from their most secure prison without anyone noticing until morning roll call. They find your tunnel, of course, but they can't understand how it was dug without proper tools or detection. The answer terrifies them. Union officers treated imprisonment as a military problem to be solved rather than a punishment to be endured. Your escape forces the Confederacy to redesign their prison security and divert resources from the war effort to prevent future mass escapes. Guards, who could be fighting Union armies instead, patrol prison tunnels looking for signs of excavation. Colonel Thomas Rose, you didn't just escape from Libby Prison, you turned Confederate captivity into a Union military operation that weakened the Southern war effort and proved that Union officers couldn't be broken by imprisonment. Your tunnel becomes a symbol of Northern determination. Every Union soldier who hears the story understands that capture doesn't mean defeat. Every Confederate guard who walks over ground that might be hiding another tunnel questions whether their security is as solid as they believed. You prove that military expertise doesn't disappear when uniforms are exchanged for prison clothes. That strategic thinking and engineering knowledge can turn the most secure Confederate prison into a launching pad for continued resistance. The 59 men who reach Union lines carry more than just their own freedom. They carry proof that Confederate attempts to demoralize the Union through brutal imprisonment have failed completely. Your escape changes the psychology of the entire Civil War. Union soldiers fight harder, knowing that capture doesn't mean the end of their contribution to victory. Confederate soldiers worry about the resources being diverted to guard prisoners who might disappear through tunnels at any moment. You've accomplished something that goes beyond individual escape. You've turned a Confederate prison into a Union victory that ripples through both armies and ultimately contributes to Northern success in the war. The tunnel you dug beneath Libby Prison becomes a monument to the idea that human ingenuity and military discipline can overcome any form of captivity, no matter how carefully designed to break the human spirit. Part 10. the final escape into legend. You're Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, and you're staring at the floor of your cell in Altiplano Federal Prison, Mexico's most secure facility. It's 2015, and the Mexican government has just finished telling the world that they've finally captured the most notorious drug lord in history. You're thinking about how wrong they are. The cell they've locked you in is supposedly escape-proof, concrete walls 2 feet thick, electronic surveillance that monitors your every movement, guards who've been specifically trained to watch for escape attempts by the man who's already embarrassed the Mexican government once before. You think they've forgotten one crucial detail. You're Joaquin Guzman, and you didn't build a drug empire by accepting other people's definitions of impossible. This isn't your first escape from Mexican custody. In 2001, you walked out of Puente Grande Federal Prison, hidden in a laundry cart, bribing so many officials that the escape looked like a government operation designed to free you. But this time is different. This time you're planning something that will make your previous escape look like a practice run. You've been studying this prison like a general studies enemy territory. Every guard rotation, every structural weakness, every routine that's developed around keeping Joaquin Guzman contained. You're not just a prisoner analyzing his cage, you're a master strategist, planning the ultimate demonstration of power. The tunnel begins somewhere beyond the prison walls, in a house that your organization purchased specifically for this operation. While prison officials congratulate themselves on their security measures, your people are digging towards you from the outside. You think about the engineering marvel taking shape beneath the prison. This isn't some crude hole scratched out with spoons. This is a mile-long tunnel equipped with electric lighting, ventilation systems, and a rail-mounted motorcycle that can carry a man at high speed through an underground highway to freedom. Your people have turned tunnel digging into an industrial operation. Professional engineers, construction equipment, sophisticated tools that can carve through rock and concrete like they're butter. You're not just escaping from prison, you're building an underground demonstration of your organization's technical capabilities. The tunnel takes months to complete, but you're patient. You've been patient your entire criminal career, building an empire, one careful decision at a time. Prison is just another business problem that requires proper planning and unlimited resources. You think about the psychology of your captors. As you wait, Mexican authorities believe that maximum security means Joaquin Guzman can't escape. They can't imagine that someone with your resources might approach the problem from the opposite direction. Instead of trying to get out of prison, you're bringing the outside world to you. The tunnel reaches your cell through a carefully calculated route that avoids all electronic detection systems. Your people have studied the prison's security architecture better than the engineers who designed it. The night of July 11th arrives. You've chosen this date carefully, timing your escape to maximize the embarrassment to Mexican authorities and minimize the chances of immediate pursuit. You step into the tunnel thinking about every decision that brought you to this moment, every drug shipment, every rival eliminated, every government official purchased. Every time someone said Joaquin Guzman couldn't be stopped. Tonight you're proving them right. The motorcycle ride through your tunnel feels like flying underground. Electric lights illuminate a passage that rivals subway systems in major cities. Ventilation keeps the air fresh. The motorcycle carries you at speeds that would be impressive on regular roads, much less in a tunnel dug beneath a maximum security prison. You emerge from the tunnel thinking about the impact this escape will have. Every law enforcement agency in Mexico will be humiliated. Every rival cartel will understand that Joaquin Guzman's organization can accomplish the impossible. Every government official who thought they could contain you will realize they underestimated your resources. But this escape is about more than personal freedom. It's about sending a message that resonates throughout Mexico and beyond. The message that some people are more powerful than the governments that try to contain them. Your tunnel becomes legendary in criminal circles worldwide. The most sophisticated prison escape in history, executed with resources and technical expertise that rival government operations. You've redefined what's possible when unlimited money meets unlimited determination. Mexican authorities spend months trying to understand how your organization could dig a mile-long tunnel without detection. They find evidence of industrial-grade construction equipment, professional engineering, and financial resources that dwarf most legitimate construction projects. What they can't understand is how one man's organization can consistently outmaneuver systems designed by teams of experts with government backing. The answer terrifies them. You treat government security as a business problem to be solved rather than an authority to be respected. Your escape forces Mexico to completely redesign their approach to containing high-value prisoners. New facilities, new technologies, new levels of surveillance that turn prisons into something approaching military installations. But you've already proven that no prison is secure enough to hold someone with your resources and determination. That criminal organizations can develop capabilities that exceed government systems when motivation and money align properly. Joaquin Guzman, you didn't just escape from Altiplano Federal Prison. You demonstrated that some criminal enterprises become so sophisticated that they operate like shadow governments with their own infrastructure and capabilities. Your mile-long tunnel with lighting, ventilation, and a motorcycle railway becomes proof that the war between law enforcement and organized crime has evolved into something that resembles conventional warfare between competing nations. You've shown the world that prison walls, no matter how thick, are meaningless when faced with unlimited resources, and the kind of planning that treats impossible as just another word for expensive. The tunnel you left behind becomes a monument to criminal ingenuity and a nightmare for every prison designer who now has to consider that their most dangerous inmates might have access to industrial construction capabilities. You escaped into legend, leaving behind evidence that some people are simply too powerful, too well organized, and too determined to be contained by conventional means. And somewhere in the world, other criminal masterminds are studying your methods, learning that there's no such thing as escape-proof when you have enough money, enough patience, and enough audacity to build your own underground railroad to freedom. Part 11, The Law Student Who Fooled Everyone. You're Ted Bundy, and you're sitting in the Pitkin County Courthouse in Aspen, Colorado, representing yourself in a murder trial. The year is 1977, and everyone thinks you're just another defendant trying to delay the inevitable. You're actually planning one of the most brazen courthouse escapes in American history. The judge has granted you permission to use the law library during breaks in your trial. You're a former law student after all, and everyone believes in the fundamental right to adequate legal representation, even for accused serial killers. You think about the irony as you study legal texts. These people are so committed to giving you a fair trial that they're about to give you something much more valuable, a second-floor window and a 6-foot drop to freedom. You've been studying this courthouse like it's your doctoral thesis. Every exit, every window, every moment when the guard's attention might be focused elsewhere, you've turned your murder trial into reconnaissance for the most audacious escape attempt in Colorado legal history. The courthouse security is designed to handle ordinary criminals, pickpockets and drunk drivers and men who get into bar fights. They're not prepared for someone who combines the intelligence of a law student with the desperation of a man facing execution. You think about timing constantly. Court breaks happen predictably. Guards relax when you're surrounded by law books instead of weapons. Everyone assumes that a man representing himself in a capital murder case is too focused on legal strategy to plan an escape. They're about to learn how wrong assumptions can be. June 15th arrives hot and clear, perfect weather for a man who's about to become a ghost. During the morning break, you ask to visit the law library. The guards escort you upstairs, unlock the door, and settle in for what they expect to be another boring session of watching Ted Bundy read case law. You open a law book and pretend to study while actually calculating angles, distances, and the exact timing you'll need to pull this off. Your heart pounds, but your hands stay steady as you turn pages and take notes like a dedicated student. The moment arrives when both guards are distracted. One steps outside to smoke, the other turns away to check something in the hallway. You have maybe 30 seconds before someone notices you're not where you're supposed to be. You think about everything that brought you to this moment as you move toward the window. Every victim, every mistake that led to your capture. Every time someone underestimated Ted Bundy's intelligence and determination. The window opens easily. Second floor to the ground is about 15 feet, far enough to break bones if you land wrong. Not far enough to stop a man who's staring at life in prison or death in an electric chair. You jump. The landing hurts, but nothing's broken. You're on your feet and moving before the pain even registers. Behind you, shouts erupt from the courthouse as guards realize that their prisoner has just vanished through a window like smoke. You're running through Aspen thinking about the head start you've just bought yourself. It will take precious minutes for authorities to organize a search. Minutes that translate to miles between you and recapture. But this is just your first escape. You're about to prove that Ted Bundy doesn't stay caught. Your freedom lasts 6 days. 6 days of hiking through Colorado wilderness, sleeping in abandoned cabins and stealing cars when walking becomes too slow. 6 days of proving that the most intelligent serial killer in American history is also one of the most resourceful escapees. When they catch you again, it's because you made the mistake of staying in Colorado instead of getting as far away as possible. You'll learn from this error. Your second escape comes 6 months later from Glenwood Springs Jail. This time you don't jump through windows. You crawl through a hole in the ceiling that you've been working on for weeks. You think about physics as you squeeze through a space that barely fits your body. Weight distribution. Leverage. The precise amount of pressure needed to remove ceiling tiles without making noise that alerts guards. You emerge in the apartment above the jail where a woman is watching television and has no idea that one of America's most wanted fugitives has just dropped through her ceiling like a twisted Christmas present. This escape gives you more than a week of freedom, more than a week to disappear completely if you make the right decisions. Instead, you head to Florida, where you'll commit more murders before being captured again. Your intelligence becomes your weakness when you can't resist the urge to kill. But your escapes become legendary in criminal circles and law enforcement academies. How does one man repeatedly embarrass professional security systems using nothing but intelligence and careful observation? You prove that the most dangerous criminals aren't necessarily the strongest or the most violent. Sometimes they're the ones who understand human psychology well enough to predict when guards will be distracted and courthouse windows will be unguarded. Your escapes force law enforcement to completely reconsider how they handle intelligent criminals. New protocols, new security measures, new levels of surveillance that recognize that some prisoners are smart enough to turn any weakness into an opportunity. Ted Bundy, you didn't just escape from custody twice. You proved that intelligence combined with absolute desperation creates a kind of criminal that existing security systems weren't designed to contain. Your law library escape becomes a case study in how educated criminals approach problems differently than ordinary prisoners. You treated courthouse security like a legal puzzle to be solved rather than a barrier to be overcome with force. The window you jump through becomes a symbol of how quickly freedom can appear and disappear when intelligence meets opportunity. One moment you're a defendant reading law books. The next moment you're a ghost vanishing into the Colorado wilderness. Your escapes remind everyone that the most dangerous predators are often the ones who look most harmless, who blend into civilized society so completely that guards forget they're dealing with someone capable of extraordinary violence and extraordinary cunning. You used society's commitment to fair legal proceedings against itself, turning constitutional rights into escape opportunities that no one saw coming until it was too late to stop you. Part 12. The Power Tools and the Underground Railroad. You're Richard Matt, and you're lying in your cell at Clinton Correctional Facility in upstate New York, listening to the sound of power tools cutting through steel. The beautiful thing is, you're the one operating them. It's 2015, and you're serving a sentence of 25 years to life for kidnapping and beating a man to death. Your cellmate, David Sweat, is doing life without parole for killing a sheriff's deputy. Together, you represent exactly the kind of prisoners that maximum security facilities are designed to contain forever. You think the state of New York is about to learn that forever is a more flexible concept than they realized. Your escape plan is so audacious that it reads like fiction. You're going to cut through the steel walls of your cells, navigate through a maze of underground tunnels, and emerge from a manhole cover nearly half a mile away from the prison. And you're going to do it all with power tools that a prison employee smuggled in because she's fallen in love with you. You think about the psychology of seduction as you work. Joyce Mitchell is a civilian employee in the prison's tailor shop, middle-aged, married, ordinary in every way except for her vulnerability to a convicted killer who knows exactly which emotional buttons to push. She thinks you're misunderstood, a good man trapped in bad circumstances. She believes that beneath your murder conviction beats the heart of someone who just needs love and understanding. You know she's completely wrong, but her delusions are useful. The power tools arrive piece by piece, smuggled past security checkpoints, by a woman who's convinced herself she's helping true love triumph over an unjust system, hacksaw blades hidden in hamburger meat, drill bits concealed in art supplies, a complete workshop delivered by someone who's supposed to be part of the prison's security system. You begin cutting through the steel wall behind your cell's bunk bed, working only during times when the noise will be covered by the prison's normal operations. The steel is thick, designed to contain men exactly like you, but power tools don't care about the theoretical strength of prison architecture. You think about patience as you work. Each cut takes hours. Each session brings the risk of discovery if a guard decides to conduct an unexpected inspection. But you've been in prison long enough to understand that guards are creatures of habit, and habits can be predicted and exploited. David Sweat works on his own wall, cutting his way toward the same tunnel system that runs beneath the prison. You're not just two prisoners planning separate escapes. You're a team of engineers dismantling a maximum security facility from the inside. The tunnels beneath Clinton Correctional are supposed to be secure areas accessible only to maintenance personnel, but prison designers never imagined that inmates might cut their way into these tunnels from above, using industrial power tools provided by lovesick employees. You study the tunnel system like a subway map, learning which passages lead where and how to navigate through underground darkness towards specific exit points. You're turning the prison's own infrastructure into your escape route. The dummy heads you create are masterpieces of deception, real hair, carefully positioned clothing, and shadows that convince casual observation that two dangerous prisoners are sleeping peacefully in their cells. You think about Joyce Mitchell's role in all this. As you prepare for escape, she's supposed to be your getaway driver, ready to pick you up when you emerge from the underground and drive you to whatever new life awaits. Escaped murderers with enough charm to turn prison employees into accomplices. But Joyce loses her nerve at the last moment. The woman who smuggled power tools past security guards gets cold feet about actually driving getaway cars. You'll have to improvise your own transportation once you're out. The night of June 6th arrives cool and dark, perfect weather for two ghosts to disappear into the wilderness of upstate New York. You cut through the final section of steel and drop into the tunnel system beneath the prison. The underground passages stretch in multiple directions, but you know exactly which route leads to freedom. You think about every decision that brought you to this moment as you crawl through tunnels that smell of rust and decades of neglect. Every crime, every conviction, every year spent planning this escape instead of accepting life behind bars. You emerge from a manhole cover on a residential street, nearly half a mile from Clinton Correctional. Behind you, the prison sits quiet and secure, its guards unaware that two of their most dangerous inmates are already breathing free air. But freedom for escaped murderers in a rural area crawling with law enforcement creates its own problems. You split up from David Sweat, figuring that two men traveling together are easier to spot than two men traveling separately. This decision saves David Sweat's life and seals your fate. You survive 3 weeks in the wilderness before a Border Patrol agent spots you near a cabin and ends your escape with gunfire. 3 weeks of proving that even maximum security prisons can't contain men with the right tools and sufficient motivation. David Sweat lasts longer, nearly reaching the Canadian border before being shot and captured. He survives to face the consequences of making the New York State prison system look foolish on an international scale. Your escape forces a complete investigation of Clinton Correctional's security procedures. How did power tools get smuggled past multiple checkpoints? How did 2 inmates cut through steel walls without detection? How did civilian employees become so emotionally compromised that they became unwitting accomplices to murder? The answers reveal systematic failures that go beyond individual corruption, a culture of complacency that treated maximum security as a guarantee rather than a goal that requires constant vigilance. Richard Matt, you didn't live to see freedom, but you proved that no prison is truly escape-proof when human psychology becomes part of the security equation. Your power tools and tunnel escape becomes a case study in how maximum security facilities can be compromised from within by inmates who understand that the weakest link in any security system is always human nature. You turned a lovesick prison employee into an unwitting accomplice, and a maximum security facility into a construction site where convicted murderers operated industrial equipment to carve their way to freedom. The tunnels you used to escape become symbols of how prison infrastructure can be turned against itself when prisoners approach security systems like engineers, solving technical problems rather than convicts accepting their fate. Part 13. The conman who became the con. You're Frank Abagnale Jr., and you're sitting in handcuffs in the back of a police car, but you're not thinking like a prisoner. You're thinking like a master manipulator who's about to turn law enforcement's own procedures against them. It's the 1960s and you've just been arrested for passing bad checks, impersonating a pilot, a doctor and a lawyer, and basically making the FBI look like amateur hour for the better part of 4 years. You think about the beautiful irony of your situation as the car approaches the courthouse. Everyone knows Frank Abagnale is a gifted con artist. What they don't realize is that being a gifted con artist means you never stop working, even when you're in custody. The escape you're planning isn't about cutting through bars or digging tunnels. It's about understanding human psychology so completely that you can convince people to unlock doors and hand you keys while believing they're following proper procedures. You've been studying law enforcement psychology throughout your criminal career. Cops want to believe they're dealing with professionals. Feds want to believe they're important enough to handle important cases. Prison guards want to believe their procedures are foolproof. You're about to prove that believing and knowing are 2 very different things. The opportunity comes during a transfer between facilities. You've convinced authorities that you have crucial information about other check forgers that you're willing to trade for reduced charges. This makes you a valuable prisoner rather than just another criminal, and valuable prisoners get treated differently. You think about the performance you're about to give as the transfer van approaches the federal building, method acting taken to its logical extreme, where the role you're playing could mean the difference between freedom and decades in prison. You tell your escorts that you're actually an undercover FBI agent working on a deep cover operation to infiltrate check forging rings. You've been so deep undercover for so long that even the FBI doesn't know where you are anymore. The story is absolutely ridiculous. It's also told with such conviction, backed up with such detailed knowledge of FBI procedures, and delivered with such apparent sincerity that experienced law enforcement officers start to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they've made a terrible mistake. You think about the psychology of authority as you spin your tale. People want to believe that their institutions are competent and well-informed. The possibility that they've arrested an undercover federal agent creates the kind of bureaucratic nightmare that makes everyone want to double-check with their supervisors before proceeding. While your escorts are making phone calls and checking with headquarters, you continue building your performance. You know FBI terminology. You understand jurisdictional issues. You speak with the confidence of someone who's absolutely certain that this misunderstanding will be cleared up as soon as the right people are contacted. The beautiful thing about impersonating a federal agent while in federal custody is that everyone assumes it's too crazy to be a lie. Who would be stupid enough to claim they're FBI while being arrested by FBI? Only someone who's actually FBI or someone who's Frank Abagnale Jr. You provide badge numbers and supervisor names that you've memorized from previous encounters with law enforcement. You reference cases that you've learned about through careful research. You create a web of details so intricate that checking each fact would take days. And you know that law enforcement operates on deadlines that don't allow for days of fact-checking. The moment comes when someone makes the decision to treat you as a potential federal agent rather than a confirmed criminal. Handcuffs come off, escort procedures change. Suddenly, you're being transported like a colleague who's been through a difficult undercover assignment rather than a prisoner being moved between facilities. You think about timing as the situation develops. Every minute that passes with you being treated as law enforcement rather than a criminal is a minute when escape becomes easier. Guards relax. Procedures become more casual. Everyone's guard drops just enough to create opportunities. When the opportunity arrives, it's almost anticlimactic. A bathroom break at a restaurant where your fellow agents are more concerned with avoiding embarrassment than maintaining security. A moment when everyone assumes someone else is watching the undercover agent who's been so cooperative and professional. You walk out the back door of the restaurant like you're stepping out for air, and you don't stop walking until you're miles away, and Frank Abagnale Jr. has vanished again. Your escape becomes legendary not because of its physical audacity, but because of its psychological sophistication. You didn't break out of prison. You convinced prison to let you go by making law enforcement complicit in their own deception. The FBI spends months trying to understand how Frank Abagnale Jr. could convince experienced agents that he was one of them while wearing handcuffs and facing federal charges. The answer terrifies them. You understand their psychology better than they understand yours. Your escape forces law enforcement to completely reconsider how they handle prisoners who might have insider knowledge of their procedures. New protocols for verifying claims. New safeguards against manipulation by criminals who understand how law enforcement thinks. But you've already proven the fundamental vulnerability in any system that relies on human judgment. People want to believe stories that make them feel important and professional, even when those stories are being told by master manipulators who specialize in giving people exactly what they want to hear. Frank Abagnale Jr., you didn't just escape from federal custody, you turned law enforcement's own professionalism against them, convincing them that releasing you was the correct procedure rather than a catastrophic mistake. Your escape becomes proof that the most successful cons aren't about fooling people into believing lies. They're about understanding people so completely that you can give them permission to believe what they want to believe anyway. You turned being Frank Abagnale Jr. into a credential that opened doors instead of a criminal history that should have kept them locked forever. Part 14. The Assassin's Mountain Gambit. You're James Earl Ray, and you're staring through the fence at Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary in Tennessee, calculating the distance between where you stand and the freedom that lies beyond those razor wire barriers. It's 1977, and you're serving a 99-year sentence for assassinating Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The state of Tennessee has made it very clear that you'll die in this prison, and they've designed their security specifically to ensure that the most hated man in America never sees freedom again. You think they've underestimated how much a man with nothing left to lose can accomplish when he decides that dying free is better than living caged. Brushy Mountain isn't just any prison. It's Tennessee's answer to Alcatraz, built into the mountains specifically to contain prisoners who can't be contained anywhere else. The terrain itself becomes part of the security system. Thick forests, steep cliffs, and wilderness that's killed experienced hikers who got lost with proper equipment. You think about the psychology of your situation as you study the mountain landscape beyond the walls. Everyone expects James Earl Ray to try something desperate. Guards watch you constantly. Other prisoners either want to kill you for your crimes or befriend you for your notoriety. But expectation creates its own blindness. When everyone's watching for desperate moves, careful planning becomes invisible. Your escape begins with patience that most prisoners don't possess. Months of observing guard routines, learning which areas of the prison are monitored less carefully, understanding the rhythms of institutional life, until you can predict what will happen next better than the guards themselves. You recruit 6 other prisoners who have their own reasons for wanting out of Brushy Mountain. This isn't about ideological solidarity, it's about combining resources and desperation until 7 men become more dangerous than the sum of their individual capabilities. You think about military tactics as you plan multiple objectives, coordinated timing, contingency plans for when things go wrong, because things always go wrong when you're betting everything on one desperate gamble. The plan requires getting through multiple security barriers simultaneously, fences that are designed to stop determined men, guard towers with clear lines of sight across the entire perimeter, electronic systems that detect movement and sound alarms automatically. You solve these problems like a general planning a military operation, diversionary tactics to draw guards' attention away from your actual escape route, improvised tools created from prison materials, timing coordinated so precisely that 7 men move through different parts of the prison system like synchronized clockwork. The night of June 10th arrives foggy and dark, perfect weather for 7 ghosts to disappear into the Tennessee mountains. Your team moves at exactly 9:15, when you know guards will be changing shifts and attention will be focused on administrative procedures rather than prisoner movements. Every man has a specific role, every action has been rehearsed mentally until execution becomes automatic. You think about Dr. King as you cut through the first fence, about the assassination that made you the most wanted man in America before your capture, about the life sentence that was supposed to ensure you'd never see freedom again. Tonight, you're betting everything that some sentences can be overturned by actions rather than appeals. The escape unfolds like a military operation, because that's what it is. 7 men moving through maximum security barriers using tactics that turn prison architecture against itself. Guards respond to alarms in one area while you're already moving through another. You reach the outer perimeter thinking about the wilderness that stretches beyond the prison walls. Thousands of acres of mountain forest where a man could disappear forever if he knows how to survive without civilization. But you're not a woodsman. You're an assassin who's spent most of his adult life in cities and prisons. The mountains that represent freedom also represent a survival challenge that might be more dangerous than staying locked up. You crash through the final fence and plunge into forest that's darker and more hostile than anything you've experienced. Behind you, alarms scream and searchlights sweep the perimeter as guards realize that 7 of their most dangerous prisoners have vanished into the night. For 54 hours, you're free. 54 hours of proving that even maximum security prisons can't contain men who are willing to bet everything on one perfectly planned operation. The mountains nearly kill you. You're not equipped for wilderness survival. And Tennessee forests don't care about your reputation or your desperation. Cold, hunger, and exhaustion wear you down faster than years of imprisonment. When bloodhounds find your trail, you're almost relieved. Death by pursuit seems preferable to death by exposure in mountains that were never meant for escaped assassins. Your recapture becomes national news. The man who killed Dr. King, free for less than 3 days, but long enough to terrify a nation that thought James Earl Ray was safely contained forever. Your escape forces a complete security review of Brushy Mountain and every other maximum security facility in Tennessee. How did 7 dangerous prisoners coordinate such a sophisticated escape? How did they overcome multiple security barriers that were supposed to be impregnable? The answers reveal that no prison is truly escape-proof when intelligent men with unlimited time study security systems carefully enough to find weaknesses that designers never anticipated. You prove that even the most hated criminals in America can still surprise their captors when desperation meets careful planning and perfect timing. Your 54 hours of freedom become a legend among prisoners and a nightmare for prison administrators. Proof that maximum security is only as strong as its weakest moment, and that every security system has weak moments if you watch long enough to find them. James Earl Ray, you didn't stay free, but you proved that no sentence is truly final until the prisoner stops fighting against it. Your mountain escape becomes evidence that some men will risk everything for a few hours of freedom, even when they know that freedom will probably end in death or recapture. You showed the world that even assassins who've committed unforgivable crimes retain enough humanity to prefer death in the wilderness over life in a cage, no matter how comfortable that cage might be. Part 15. The Great Train Robber's Ladder to Freedom. You're Ronnie Biggs, and you're standing in the exercise yard of Wandsworth Prison in London, looking up at walls that the British government swears will contain you for the next 30 years. You're thinking about how wrong they are. It's 1965, and you're serving time for your role in the Great Train Robbery, the heist that made you and your fellow criminals legends throughout Britain. 15 men stopped a Royal Mail train and walked away with £2.5 million, making it the crime of the century. You think about the irony as you study the prison architecture. The British justice system is so proud of catching the Great Train Robbers that they've put you all in the same facility, apparently believing that Wandsworth Prison is secure enough to hold the most resourceful criminals in British history. They're about to learn that resourceful criminals don't stop being resourceful just because they're behind bars. Your sentence is 30 years, which means you'll be an old man before you see freedom again. Your fellow robbers are looking at similar sentences. The British government wants to make examples of you all, demonstrating that crime doesn't pay even when it's executed with military precision. You think they've forgotten that men who can stop moving trains might also be capable of stopping moving prison sentences. The plan begins with your wife Charmian, who visits you regularly and seems like a devoted spouse trying to support her imprisoned husband. What the guards don't realize is that every visit includes detailed discussions about guard rotations, security procedures, and the exact timing needed to pull off the most audacious prison break in British history. You study Wandsworth like it's a target to be robbed rather than a punishment to be endured. Every guard change, every routine that's developed around containing the Great Train Robbers, every moment when attention might be focused elsewhere. The breakthrough comes when you realize that the prison's exercise yard is overlooked by a house across the street, a house that your associates can rent, a house that provides a clear line of sight to the exact spot where prisoners gather during recreation time. You think about physics as you refine the plan, rope ladders thrown from second-story windows, the precise timing needed to coordinate external help with internal positioning, the split-second decisions that will determine whether this becomes legend or disaster. Your team outside includes men who understand that some operations require military-level precision and civilian-level audacity. They rent the house across from Wandsworth, establish surveillance routines, and prepare equipment that turns a residential building into a launch platform for prison escape. The rope ladder is a masterpiece of criminal engineering, strong enough to support multiple men climbing simultaneously, long enough to reach from a second-story window to the prison exercise yard, light enough to be thrown accurately across the street that separates freedom from incarceration. You think about the psychology of guards as you prepare for escape day. They're watching for tunnels, hacksaw blades, and violent outbreaks. They're not watching for rope ladders thrown from civilian houses by accomplices who've turned urban planning into escape planning. July 8th arrives warm and clear, perfect weather for the most public prison escape in British history. During afternoon exercise, you position yourself in the exact spot that your accomplices can reach from their window across the street. Around you, other prisoners walk and talk, unaware that they're about to witness either a masterpiece or a catastrophe. The rope ladder comes flying through the air like salvation with knots. It lands exactly where it's supposed to land, unrolling between the house window and the prison yard like a bridge between captivity and freedom. You think about timing as you grab the ladder and start climbing. Every second counts. Guards are already shouting and reaching for weapons. Alarms are beginning to sound. The entire British penal system is about to mobilize to stop one man from climbing a rope. But you're already halfway up, thinking about Brazil and extradition laws and the life that awaits escaped train robbers who choose their destinations carefully. You reach the house window and tumble inside, immediately surrounded by accomplices who've turned a residential neighborhood into a staging area for criminal escape. Behind you, Wandsworth Prison erupts in chaos as guards realize that one of Britain's most notorious criminals has just vanished through their own exercise yard. The getaway car is waiting outside, engine running, driven by men who understand that successful escapes require perfect logistics and absolute commitment. You're speeding through London streets, thinking about how 30 years of imprisonment just became 30 seconds of climbing. But this is just the beginning of your real escape. Getting out of Wandsworth was the easy part. Staying out of British custody requires leaving Britain entirely, and the British government has agreements with most countries that would make Ronnie Biggs a welcome visitor for about 5 minutes. You head for Brazil, a country whose extradition laws contain loopholes that might protect escaped British criminals if they play their cards correctly. The journey involves multiple countries, false identities, and the kind of international travel that makes customs officials nervous. Brazil becomes your home for the next 35 years. 35 years of proving that some escapes aren't just about getting out of prison. They're about getting so far away that pursuit becomes more expensive than the satisfaction of recapture. Your rope ladder escape becomes legendary throughout Britain and beyond. The image of a great train robber climbing out of maximum security, using equipment thrown from a residential window, captures imaginations and terrifies prison administrators. British authorities spend years trying to extradite you from Brazil, but Brazilian law protects you as long as you don't commit crimes on Brazilian soil. You become a celebrity, a tourist attraction, a living reminder that some criminals become more famous for their escapes than for their original crimes. Your escape forces British prisons to completely reconsider their approach to exercise yards and perimeter security. How do you prevent rope ladders thrown from civilian buildings? How do you secure exercise areas without turning them into concrete boxes that violate human rights standards? Ronnie Biggs, you didn't just escape from Wandsworth Prison. You escaped from Britain itself, creating a new life in a country that became your sanctuary for decades. Your rope ladder becomes a symbol of criminal ingenuity and international law's complexity. Sometimes the most audacious escapes aren't about tunnels or violence. They're about understanding geography and legal systems well enough to find countries where British justice can't reach. You proved that the Great Train Robbery was just the beginning of your criminal career, not the end. That some men are too resourceful and too determined to be contained by any single country's justice system, no matter how sophisticated their prisons might be. Part 16. The Future Madame's Revolutionary Escape. You're Marie Groscholtz, and you're sitting in a cell in Alençon prison during the height of the French Revolution, listening to the sounds of angry crowds demanding blood and justice in equal measure. You're thinking about how ironic it would be to die here, considering you're destined to become Madame Tussaud and create wax figures of famous people for the next century. It's the late 1700s, and France has gone completely mad with revolutionary fervour. Anyone associated with the aristocracy faces the guillotine. Anyone who's worked for the royal family becomes a target for revolutionary justice. Anyone who's created art for the nobility becomes an enemy of the people. You think about the terrible timing of your arrest as you listen to crowds outside calling for executions. You've spent years perfecting the art of wax modelling, creating lifelike figures of French royalty and aristocrats. Now those same skills have marked you for death during a revolution that sees royal portraiture as treason. The revolution has turned France into a place where yesterday's heroes become today's villains, based on political winds that change faster than weather. Skill and artistry mean nothing when crowds want blood and the government needs scapegoats. You think about survival as you study your cell and fellow prisoners. This isn't about escaping from stone walls and iron bars. This is about escaping from a political system that's consuming people faster than the guillotine can process them. Your fellow prisoners include nobles, clergy, and ordinary citizens whose only crime was being in the wrong place when revolutionary enthusiasm needed fresh targets. Some weep constantly. Others pray for miracles. A few plan hopeless escape attempts that will probably end with bullets in the courtyard. You think about your wax modelling techniques differently now. Understanding human anatomy becomes useful for more than creating realistic figures. Knowing how bodies move and bend might be the difference between escape and execution. The prison itself is overcrowded beyond capacity. Revolutionary justice is arresting people faster than it can process them, creating a backlog of condemned prisoners who wait for death in conditions that are barely controlled chaos. This chaos becomes your opportunity. You study the guards, learning their routines and understanding their psychology. These aren't professional jailers. They're ordinary citizens caught up in revolutionary fervor, trying to manage a prison system that's been overwhelmed by political events beyond anyone's control. You think about persuasion as you interact with guards and fellow prisoners. Your artistic skills make you useful for documenting other prisoners, creating records that the revolutionary government needs for their trials and executions. This usefulness becomes protection. Instead of just another condemned aristocrat sympathizer, you become Marie the artist who can create accurate records of enemies of the revolution. Instead of being processed for execution, you become valuable enough to keep alive. You think about timing as you work on these morbid portraits. Every day you remain useful is another day to plan your escape from revolutionary justice. Every sketch you complete of condemned prisoners is another opportunity to study the prison's routines and weaknesses. The breakthrough comes when you realize that revolutionary chaos creates gaps in security that professional prison systems would never allow. Guards are overwhelmed. Record keeping is haphazard. The line between prisoner and worker becomes blurred when artistic skills are needed for official purposes. You start moving through the prison more freely, ostensibly to sketch prisoners in different sections, but actually mapping every corridor, every exit, every moment when attention is focused elsewhere. Your artistic work becomes reconnaissance for the most delicate escape attempt of your career. The plan you develop is pure audacity wrapped in revolutionary rhetoric. You convince guards that you need to visit condemned prisoners in their cells to create death masks and final portraits for revolutionary records. This gives you access to areas of the prison where ordinary prisoners never go. You think about performance as you execute this plan. Every conversation with guards requires you to project revolutionary enthusiasm while planning counter-revolutionary escape. Every sketch session with condemned prisoners becomes an opportunity to study security procedures without appearing suspicious. The night you choose for escape is one of maximum chaos. Revolutionary tribunals are working overtime, processing prisoners for execution. Guards are exhausted from managing overcrowded facilities. The entire system is stretched beyond its breaking point. You walk out of Alençon prison during a shift change, carrying art supplies and wearing clothes that make you look like a civilian worker rather than a condemned prisoner. Your artistic materials become props that support your performance as someone who belongs outside prison walls. You think about acting as you move through the prison's outer areas. Confident stride, official papers that you've created using your artistic skills. The demeanor of someone who has legitimate business being where she is, rather than someone escaping from revolutionary justice. The guards who see you leaving assume you're finishing work sessions with condemned prisoners. Why would anyone question an artist leaving prison after completing official revolutionary documentation? The chaos of the revolution works in your favor, creating confusion that covers your escape. You emerge into the streets of revolutionary France, thinking about how close you came to sharing the fate of the aristocrats you'd portrayed in wax. Your artistic skills saved your life twice, first by making you useful enough to keep alive, then by providing the tools and credibility needed for escape. But escaping from prison is only the beginning of surviving the French Revolution. You need to disappear completely, abandoning your identity as Marie Groscholtz and becoming someone who has no connection to royal portraiture or aristocratic art. You eventually make your way to England, where your wax modelling skills become the foundation for what will become Madame Tussauds, one of the most famous tourist attractions in the world. Your revolutionary escape becomes the forgotten prelude to a career that makes you internationally famous. Your prison break during the French Revolution becomes a footnote in history, overshadowed by your later success as Madame Tussauds. But you know the truth: without escaping from Alençon prison, there would have been no Madame Tussauds at all. You proved that artistic skills can become survival tools when political chaos makes ordinary rules meaningless. That creativity and performance ability can open doors that strength and violence cannot. Your escape represents a different kind of prison break entirely. Not the dramatic tunnels or violent confrontations that make headlines, but the subtle manipulation of circumstances and psychology that allows someone to walk away from certain death wearing the mask of legitimacy. Marie Groschultz, you didn't just escape from prison during the French Revolution. You escaped from history's tendency to consume artists along with aristocrats when political winds change direction. Your wax modeling techniques, originally developed to create entertainment for the nobility, became tools for documenting revolutionary justice and ultimately for escaping revolutionary execution. You transformed artistic ability into survival strategy, proving that creativity can be the most practical skill imaginable when everything else about society has stopped making sense. Your escape becomes proof that sometimes the pen truly is mightier than the sword, especially when the pen is guided by hands skilled enough to create life from wax and freedom from chaos. Part 17. The Vanishing Act in the Woods. You're Ralph Bucky Phillips, and you're standing in the woods of upstate New York, thinking about how 3 months of freedom is worth more than 30 years of imprisonment, even if those 3 months end with bullets. It's 2006 and you've just escaped from Erie County Correctional Facility through a hole you cut in the kitchen ceiling. The guards think they're looking for an ordinary escaped prisoner. They have no idea they're hunting a man who's about to turn the forests of western New York into his personal battlefield. You think about the mathematics of your situation as you move through trees that stretch for miles in every direction. You're facing burglary charges that could put you away for decades. You're 51 years old, which means prison time equals the rest of your natural life. Those aren't acceptable odds for a man who's spent his entire adult life refusing to accept other people's definitions of possible. Your escape itself was almost anticlimactic. Months of patient work with improvised tools, cutting through ceiling tiles and ductwork until you created a passage that led from the kitchen to the roof. The guards discovered your hole 12 hours after you were already deep in the woods, giving you a head start that professional manhunters might never overcome. You think about survival techniques as you establish your first camp. This isn't about running until you reach safety. This is about disappearing so completely that law enforcement has to treat the wilderness itself as your accomplice. The forests of western New York become your kingdom. You know these woods from decades of hunting and camping. Every trail, every hunting cabin, every seasonal camp that might provide temporary shelter or supplies. You're not a lost escaped prisoner stumbling through unfamiliar territory. You're a woodsman coming home. You start living like a ghost who feeds on civilization's edges, breaking into unoccupied cabins for food and clothing, stealing from hunting camps that won't be visited for months, taking vehicles when you need transportation, abandoning them when they become liabilities. You think about the psychology of pursuit as you evade search teams that grow larger and more sophisticated every day. State police, federal marshals, local sheriff's departments, and specialized tracking units are all hunting for one man who refuses to be found. But they're hunting using methods designed for ordinary fugitives, roadblocks that assume you'll try to leave the area, surveillance of family and friends who might help you, standard procedures that work against criminals who think like criminals. You're not thinking like a criminal. You're thinking like a predator who's turned the entire law enforcement establishment into prey. The shootings begin when pursuit gets too close. A state trooper who spots you near a stolen vehicle, sheriff's deputies who stumble across one of your temporary camps. Each encounter ends with gunfire that proves you're not planning to surrender quietly. You think about escalation as you watch news reports about the manhunt growing into the largest search operation in New York State history. Every shooting makes you more dangerous in their eyes and more determined to avoid capture in yours. The media turns you into a folk hero and a terrorist simultaneously. Some people admire your ability to evade capture against impossible odds. Others see you as a dangerous fugitive who's shooting police officers and terrorizing rural communities. You understand that both perspectives are correct. You're proving that one determined man can embarrass entire law enforcement agencies while simultaneously demonstrating why escaped prisoners who shoot cops become national priorities. The woods become your fortress and your prison. You're free from jail, but you're trapped in a lifestyle that requires constant vigilance and isolation. Every human contact risks capture. Every supply run risks confrontation. Every day of freedom costs more in stress and danger than most people could handle. You think about sustainability as months pass and pursuit never slackens. This isn't a temporary escape that will end with you reaching safety somewhere beyond law enforcement's reach. This is a permanent siege where you're both the besieged and the besieger. The manhunt involves helicopters with thermal imaging, tracking dogs, and hundreds of officers who've made capturing Bucky Phillips their full-time job. They're spending millions of dollars and endless resources to catch one man who's proven that rural America contains hiding places that modern technology can't penetrate. Your survival techniques evolve constantly. Moving camp every few days, avoiding patterns that trackers might predict, creating false trails that send search teams in wrong directions. You've turned evasion into an art form that law enforcement academies will study for decades. But you also understand that this can only end one way. You're not getting older gracefully while living rough in the woods. Your body is wearing down from stress and exposure. Your luck won't hold forever against pursuit that never stops and never decreases in intensity. The end comes after 159 days of freedom. 159 days of proving that no prison can hold a man who's willing to trade everything for the experience of being ungovernable. A Pennsylvania state trooper spots you near a stolen vehicle and shoots you during the arrest attempt. Not fatally, but enough to end your run through the wilderness that became your last stand against a system that wanted to cage you. Your 159 days become legendary among escaped prisoners and law enforcement alike. Proof that one man with wilderness skills and absolute determination can tie up enormous resources and make professional manhunters look helpless. Ralph Bucky Phillips, you didn't escape to freedom. You escaped to war, turning the forests of New York into a battlefield where you fought against capture until your body could no longer sustain the fight. Your escape becomes a case study in how modern fugitives can exploit rural America's vast spaces to stay ahead of technological pursuit methods that work perfectly in urban environments, but become less effective when the hunted understands wilderness better than the hunters. You prove that freedom isn't always about reaching safety. Sometimes it's about choosing the terms of your own defeat, living and fighting on your own schedule, rather than accepting other people's timelines for your surrender. Part 18. The London Lockpicker's Legend. You're Jack Shepherd, and you're standing in the condemned cell of Newgate Prison in London, looking at shackles that were specifically designed to hold the most notorious escape artist in 18th century England. You're thinking about how chains and locks are just puzzles that haven't been solved yet. It's 1724, and you're 22 years old with a reputation that makes London's criminal underworld whisper your name like a prayer and law enforcement curse it, like a blasphemy. You've escaped from custody 4 times already, each escape more audacious than the last. You think about the irony of your situation as you examine the heavy iron fetters around your ankles. They call this place the strongest prison in England. They've put you in the most secure cell they can devise. They've loaded you with enough chains to anchor a ship. They still don't understand that Jack Shepherd doesn't stay chained. Your first escape was from a roundhouse in St. Charles, where constables thought a small cell and a locked door would contain a young thief who'd been caught picking pockets. You picked the lock with a nail you found on the floor and walked out while they were congratulating themselves on catching the infamous Jack Shepherd. You think about lock mechanisms constantly. Every tumbler, every spring, every piece of metal that can be manipulated. If you understand how pressure and leverage work together, locks are just machines, and machines can be defeated by men who think like engineers. Your second escape came from New Prison in Clerkenwell, where they'd put you in a cell that was supposed to be escape-proof. You broke through the wall using tools you'd hidden on your body during the arrest. creating a hole large enough to squeeze through while guards slept. The third escape made you legendary. From the same Clerkenwell prison, this time loaded with heavy irons that were supposed to make movement impossible. You picked the locks on your shackles, broke through the roof, and disappeared into London's maze of streets and alleys like smoke dispersing in wind. You think about fame as you plan your fourth and most ambitious escape. Every newspaper in London carries stories about Jack Sheppard. Ballads are written about your exploits. Common people see you as a hero who thumbs his nose at authority, while aristocrats demand that someone find a way to contain you permanently. This fame creates its own problems. Every constable in London knows your face. Every prison has been warned about your escape techniques. Every lock in the city has been examined for weaknesses that Jack Sheppard might exploit. But fame also creates opportunities. People want to see the notorious Jack Sheppard, even in chains. They pay money to visit your cell, gawking at the young man who's made fools of London's finest authorities. These visitors bring tools disguised as gifts and information disguised as gossip. You think about the tools hidden throughout your cell as you prepare for what everyone assumes will be your final escape attempt. Visitors have smuggled in small files, pieces of wire, and other implements that look like harmless trinkets, but can be used to defeat the most sophisticated security measures London can devise. The shackles on your legs weigh nearly 20 pounds each, connected by chains that are supposed to make walking impossible and escape unthinkable. The cell door is reinforced with additional iron bands. Guards check on you every few hours around the clock. You've spent weeks studying these restraints, like a locksmith learning his trade. Every rivet, every joint, every point where metal connects to metal. You understand these chains better than the blacksmiths who forged them. The night of your final escape arrives cold and foggy. Perfect weather for a ghost to disappear into London's labyrinth of narrow streets and hidden passages. You begin by working on the shackles, using tools so small that guards who searched you never found them. Piece by piece, you dismantle restraints that were supposed to hold you until your execution date arrives. You think about patience as you work. Each lock takes hours to defeat. Each chain requires careful manipulation to avoid making noise that might alert guards. This isn't a desperate rush toward freedom. This is a master craftsman dismantling the work of inferior artisans. The cell door yields to techniques you've perfected through 3 previous escapes. The additional iron reinforcements become just more puzzles to solve rather than barriers to overcome. You emerge from your cell thinking about the symbolic importance of this moment. Jack Sheppard, walking free from the strongest prison in England, proves that no authority is absolute when faced with sufficient skill and determination. But you're not just escaping from Newgate Prison. You're escaping into legend that will outlive you by centuries. Your freedom lasts only 2 weeks before you're recaptured, but those 2 weeks cement your reputation as the greatest escape artist in London's history. 2 weeks of proving that Jack Sheppard can walk through walls when the mood strikes him. Your execution becomes a public spectacle that draws crowds larger than most royal ceremonies. 80,000 people come to watch Jack Sheppard hang, proving that some criminals become more famous than the kings who order their deaths. Your escapes change the entire approach to prison security in London and beyond. Every lock is redesigned with Jack Sheppard's techniques in mind. Every cell is reinforced against methods you pioneered. Every shackle is tested against manipulation techniques you invented. Jack Sheppard, you didn't live long enough to enjoy lasting freedom, but you proved that skill and determination can overcome any restraint that human beings can devise. Your lock-picking techniques become the foundation for escape methods that future prisoners will use for centuries. Your story becomes proof that some people are simply too clever and too determined to be contained by conventional security measures. You turned breaking out of prison into performance art, demonstrating that the most sophisticated locks in England were just puzzles waiting for someone smart enough to solve them. Your name becomes synonymous with escape artistry itself, inspiring criminals and terrifying authorities for generations after your death. Jack Sheppard, The man who proved that chains are only as strong as the imagination of the person wearing them. Part 19, The Machine Gun Symphony. You're Antonio Ferrara, and you're standing in the exercise yard of a French maximum security prison, listening to the sound of automatic gunfire getting closer by the second. You're thinking about how beautiful it sounds when that gunfire is coming to rescue you. It's 2003, and you're serving time for armed robbery in a facility that the French government designed to contain exactly the kind of criminal who has friends with military-grade weapons and absolutely no respect for legal procedure. You think about the irony as explosions echo from the prison's outer perimeter. They locked you up to keep society safe from Antonio Ferrara, but they forgot that Antonio Ferrara has friends who consider society's safety a secondary concern to Antonio Ferrara's freedom. Your accomplices aren't planning a subtle jailbreak. They're not digging tunnels or bribing guards or picking locks with improvised tools. They're planning to blast their way through the front gates of a maximum security prison like they're storming a military installation. Because that's exactly what they're doing. You think about friendship as machine gun fire rakes the guard towers. Most criminals work alone or with small groups that fall apart under pressure. But you've built an organization that treats member loyalty like a religious obligation and prison walls like temporary inconveniences. The attack begins at exactly 3:15 on a Tuesday afternoon, when guard rotations create brief vulnerabilities in the prison's defensive posture. Your friends have been studying this facility like generals planning a siege, learning guard schedules and identifying weak points in security systems. You hear the distinctive sound of shaped charges detonating against the outer gates, military explosives used with surgical precision to create openings large enough for armed men to pour through. This isn't a prison break. This is an armed invasion with liberation as the objective. You think about timing as gunfire erupts throughout the prison complex. Every second counts when you're betting everything on overwhelming security through superior firepower and tactical surprise. The guards respond with courage but not with adequate preparation. They trained for riots and escape attempts, not for military-style assaults by heavily armed criminals using professional tactics. Their handguns and riot gear become pathetically inadequate against assault rifles and military training. You move toward the predetermined rendezvous point, thinking about the kind of loyalty that motivates men to attack maximum security prisons with automatic weapons. Your organization doesn't just commit crimes together, you go to war together when necessary. The assault team reaches your location exactly on schedule, moving through the prison like they've rehearsed this operation dozens of times, which they probably have, turning your liberation into a military exercise that happens to involve French law enforcement as the opposition force. You think about escalation as you join your rescuers and move toward the exit they've blasted through maximum security barriers. This isn't just an escape anymore. It's a declaration of war against any government that thinks it can contain Antonio Ferrara and his associates permanently. The firefight continues as your team moves through the prison toward freedom, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Guards with pistols and standard police training can't compete with criminals who've acquired military weapons and tactical expertise. You reach the vehicles waiting outside the prison, thinking about the statement this rescue makes. Antonio Ferrara doesn't just have friends. He has an army that's willing to wage war against the French justice system when their commander gets captured. The getaway convoy moves through French countryside like a military retreat from enemy territory. Multiple vehicles, coordinated routes, and enough firepower to discourage pursuit by anyone except specialized tactical units that will take time to mobilize. You think about the broader implications as distance grows between you and the smoking ruins of your former prison. This isn't just one man escaping from custody. This is proof that some criminal organizations have developed capabilities that rival government forces. Your rescue becomes international news within hours. Armed assault on maximum security prison. Military-grade weapons used against civilian targets. Criminal organization demonstrates capacity for sustained combat operations against law enforcement. French authorities spend weeks trying to understand how Antonio Ferrara's associates acquired the weapons training, and tactical coordination necessary to storm a maximum security facility. The investigation reveals connections to international arms dealers and military contractors who apparently don't discriminate between government and criminal clients. Your escape forces France to completely reconsider their approach to containing organized criminals. New security protocols that assume some prisoners have access to military-level support, guard training that includes preparation for combat operations rather than just crowd control. But you've already demonstrated that some criminal organizations operate like private armies with their own intelligence networks, supply chains, and tactical capabilities. Your machine gun rescue becomes a legend in criminal circles worldwide, proof that loyalty and proper equipment can overcome any security system if you're willing to escalate beyond what authorities expect. Antonio Ferrara, you didn't just escape from prison, you proved that some criminal organizations have evolved beyond individual lawbreaking into something approaching insurgent warfare against government authority. Your friends didn't sneak you out or trick guards into releasing you. They conquered a French maximum security prison using tactics that belong on battlefields rather than in criminal justice proceedings. You forced an entire nation to acknowledge that some criminals have access to resources and training that make conventional prison security obsolete, that the line between organized crime and organized warfare has become blurred beyond recognition. Your rescue demonstrates that when criminal organizations acquire military capabilities, traditional law enforcement becomes inadequate, that some escapes require military responses because they're planned and executed as military operations. The machine gun symphony that freed you from French custody becomes proof that crime has evolved into something that requires governments to choose between treating criminals like civilians or treating them like enemy combatants. And your organization has made it very clear which category they prefer. Part 20. The witnesses who refuse to die. You're Rudolf VRBA, and you're lying beneath a pile of wood in Auschwitz-Birkenau, listening to German guards search for 2 Slovak Jews who have committed the ultimate crime against the Third Reich. You've decided to tell the world what's really happening here. It's April 1944, and you're surrounded by the machinery of genocide that the Nazis have refined into industrial efficiency. Gas chambers operating around the clock, crematoriums that burn human beings like fuel, a death camp that's designed to erase entire populations from existence. You think about the mathematics of your situation as dogs bark in the distance. The Germans are murdering thousands of people every day, but the outside world doesn't know the full scope of what's happening. They know about persecution, deportation, harsh conditions. They don't know about systematic extermination. You're planning to escape, not just to save your own life, but to save the lives of hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews who are scheduled for deportation to Auschwitz. Your escape will carry information that might stop the Holocaust's final phase if anyone believes what you have to say. You think about the bunker you've constructed with Alfred Wetzler, your fellow escapee, hidden beneath stacked wood in a location just outside the camp's inner perimeter, but still within the outer security zone. The Germans will search intensively for 3 days, then assume you've either died in the woods or escaped completely. Your plan requires surviving those 3 days without food, water, or movement, while German guards and dogs search every possible hiding spot for 2 prisoners who've committed treason against the Reich. The bunker is barely large enough for 2 men to lie side by side. You're sharing this coffin-sized space with detailed documentation about Auschwitz's operations, guard schedules, transport numbers, killing methods, crematorium capacities, information that proves the Holocaust is real and ongoing. You think about responsibility as you wait in darkness. The most prison escapes are about personal freedom. Your escape carries the weight of testimony that might save lives if you can reach the outside world with credible evidence about Nazi extermination policies. The search begins within hours of your disappearance. Dogs, guards, and systematic examination of every building, ditch, and hiding place within miles of the camp. You hear them pass directly over your hiding spot multiple times, close enough to touch the wood that conceals your location. You think about patience as hours turn into days. Every breath must be controlled to avoid making noise. Every movement risks discovery that would end with bullets and the destruction of documentation that took months to compile. The tobacco you scattered around your bunker works perfectly, overwhelming the dog's ability to track your scent. Russian prisoners taught you this technique, and it saves your life during the most intensive search you've ever experienced. On the third night, the search intensity decreases as guards assume you've either escaped or died in the wilderness. This is when you emerge from your hiding place and begin the real escape, getting out of Poland with information that could change the course of the war. You think about the weight of knowledge as you move through Polish countryside towards Slovakia. You're carrying detailed intelligence about Nazi genocide operations, transport schedules for Hungarian Jews, precise descriptions of gas chambers and killing procedures. Information that proves the Holocaust is happening exactly as the Nazis planned it. The journey to Slovakia takes 10 days of hiking through territory controlled by German forces and Polish resistance fighters, who might help you or might turn you in depending on their political affiliations and personal courage. You reach Slovakian resistance contacts who help you compile your information into what becomes known as the Weber-Wetzlar Report, 32 pages of detailed testimony about Auschwitz operations, including precise descriptions of gas chambers, crematoriums, and the systematic murder of European Jews. You think about credibility as you work with Jewish leaders to disseminate your report. The information you're providing is so horrific that many people will dismiss it as propaganda or exaggeration. Who could believe that the Germans have built factories specifically designed to murder human beings? Your report reaches the Allies within weeks, providing the first detailed, credible account of Nazi extermination operations written by actual witnesses who escaped from Auschwitz. Government officials who had suspected genocide now have documentary proof from men who lived through it. But you also learn about the gap between information and action. Even with your detailed testimony, Allied governments are reluctant to take dramatic steps to stop the Holocaust. Military priorities, political considerations, and simple disbelief combine to limit the immediate impact of your escape. Your testimony does help save the lives of approximately 120,000 Hungarian Jews when international pressure forces the Hungarian government to halt deportations to Auschwitz. Not all the lives you'd hoped to save, but more lives than most prison escapes managed to preserve. Rudolf VRBA, you didn't escape from Auschwitz to save yourself. You escaped to save others, carrying information that proved the Holocaust was real, ongoing, and stoppable if the world chose to act. Your escape becomes unique in the history of prison breaks because it was motivated by witness rather than freedom. You risked everything not to avoid punishment, but to prevent genocide. Your bunker beneath the woodpile becomes a symbol of resistance against totalitarian systems that depend on secrecy and denial. You proved that even the most sophisticated machinery of oppression can be documented and exposed by individuals willing to risk everything for truth. The Weber-Wetzlar Report becomes one of the most important documents of World War II, providing evidence that historians and prosecutors use for decades to understand and prosecute Nazi crimes. You escaped from hell not to find heaven, but to warn the world that hell was real and spreading. Your escape gave voice to millions who died in silence, ensuring that their murders would be remembered and documented rather than forgotten and denied. In a collection of escapes motivated by freedom, yours stands apart as an escape motivated by conscience. You broke out of Auschwitz to break the silence that allowed genocide to continue in darkness. Your escape proves that sometimes the most important prison breaks aren't about the people who get out. They're about the people who might be saved if someone has the courage to tell the truth about what's happening behind the walls.